In a secluded mountain village, hidden by mist and shadow, an illness had emerged. A sickness that could not be explained by science, by bacteria, or by any mortal understanding. This was a sickness that took hold of a person's bones, forced them to move of their own accord, and twisted bodies into something beyond human. They called it the living bones. Our story begins in a humble hospital, where a steady influx of victims with this rare affliction had been filling the morgue. Their bones, restless, like they were alive, clattering and shifting beneath skin that had already turned cold. Our protagonist, Dr. Marnie Liu, the hospital's lead coroner, was seasoned, skeptical, and precise. For her, the dead were quiet mysteries to be solved, never something to be feared. But that winter, under the shadow of a lunar eclipse, things changed. One by one, patients fell to the living bones. They came in with the same symptoms: bone-deep aches, feverish tremors, and an agonizing sensation that their skeletons were moving, straining against their bodies. And soon enough, the curse took hold. In the middle of an autopsy on one of the afflicted, Marnie felt something strange. The body on her table, a young nurse who'd succumbed only the night before, shuddered as though she were still alive. And then right before Marnie's eyes, the young woman's skeleton began to rearrange itself, an unholy cracking as the bones bent into twisted, unnatural positions, defying all known biology. Panic began to seep into the hospital halls. One of the nurses ran to the village elder, a reclusive figure who held ancient knowledge of the land and its lore. She returned pale, her hands trembling, with a warning. The illness was not a disease at all, but the work of the dark god of the mountain. During the eclipse, it would call its followers, those whose bones had turned against them. The god was gathering a legion of the dead to return to its dark kingdom. It was then that Marnie spotted Eddie, the hospital's young errand boy. Eddie, who'd survived the infection somehow, limping with a strange smile plastered on his face. But what Marnie didn't know was that Eddie's survival was conditional. Eddie had stolen an artifact from the cursed tomb in the mountains, a talisman that kept him alive, but also kept him tethered. That night, Eddie slipped the talisman to another patient, hoping to escape his fate by passing the curse along. But the artifact worked in unexpected ways. It didn't just protect, it amplified. By dawn, it was clear. The talisman, now out of Eddie's hands, had released the curse, unbridled. In one of the hospital rooms, a patient rose from their bed, their bones controlling them like a marionette. Another patient followed, then another. The followers moved toward the village center, their faces frozen in twisted smiles, mouths slack, as if something deep within was grinning through them. And they weren't alone. The bones of the dead were rising too. Marnie tried desperately to contain the epidemic, barricading doors, whispering scientific reasons to herself, even as her own fingers began to tremble. But as she watched Eddie walking, bones snapping in horrific angles as he lurched forward, she knew this was beyond science. He too had joined the cursed throng. As the moon reached its darkest point, the god's influence grew. Marnie, in a desperate attempt to save herself, fled up the mountain, praying the high ground would offer protection. And it did, for a time. But as she looked back down at the village, she saw them. Hundreds of bodies, moving like a dark river, bones clattering, smiles wide and vacant, their silent march echoing up the mountain. They say she watched until dawn, until the last body collapsed under the breaking sun, until the god had gathered what it needed. The village? It was left empty, every last inhabitant a hollow shell. But the twist? The final cruel joke of the dark god. It's said that in the mountain village, every winter solstice, the fog settles thick over the town. And if you listen closely, just as the moon rises, you can still hear them. The twisted, laughing echoes of the living bones marching onward for all eternity.